are the bridges between what we are and what we could be.
Writer-director Brett Bentman brings us Fire Breather. Bentman probably most known for his Bull Shark movies. The original Bull Shark movie, I actually say I probably liked more than most, without saying it's necessarily a great movie. And it was in fact more or less a kind of low-budget remake of Jaws. So then we move to Fire Breather, which you could arguably say is a kind of low-budget remake of Reign of Fire. A kind of high-budget blockbuster that I think has been largely forgotten about. So Fire Breather imagines a world where dragons exist. Now this is the modern-day world, and the kind of the backstory is that they have existed in medieval times, and they were kind of dormant for hundreds of years, but have recently kind of re-emerged and caused the kind of the globe to go into a kind of apocalyptic state, you might say, and humanity is now sort of scattered and hiding from these kind of particular creatures. And it focuses on this father and daughter who are living in an area which is out of the way and not really known for dragon attacks. And a hunter comes to them and said there's evidence that dragons are coming into this particular area. And it turns out this daughter may well be a kind of psychic who is able to sort of predict and possibly even communicate with dragons while she sleeps. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about it. Fire Breather. An extremely low budget movie. If you've seen the Bull Shark movies, you'll kind of know the level of movie, what to expect here. But I would say this even feels a smaller scale in some ways, because it is mostly sort of a exposition film. And we'll come on to why that's a negative in a minute, but I want to talk about the positives first of all. I actually thought this movie, for its flaws, which we'll come on to, does kind of seem somewhat thoughtful, and the mythology, even though it's largely expressed through exposition, is relatively well thought out, and you can kind of get the idea here that it's somewhat of a metaphor for humans destroying the natural world, and if you were to live alongside it, more or less, the world would be a better place. And that's kind of the metaphor for the kind of the dragons here. And humans not really kind of having the natural world's best interests at heart, or at least that's the kind of the idea that it seemed to me, at least. So that there is a kind of a thoughtfulness through the movie, and I will say that the movie takes a very earnest tone. It really has three major characters. There's like one other kind of small part in the role, but it's really three people. And the father and the daughter, I mean, it's played so sort of earnestly and kind of grounded. It takes itself like super seriously. And because of that, you kind of feel a little bit of gravitas. I think certainly from the father here, who I think's not a bad actor, if I'm completely honest, and gives this sort of, this kind of very sort of gruff performance, and like this father who's kind of seen it all. And even though it's expressed mostly just through kind of dialogue and exposition, I actually thought he did a reasonable job here of kind of portraying this kind of world. And we don't really see any of this. It's just kind of showing. But the other kind of the two actors, the daughter and this hunter, not a bad effort either, I would say. I think that, considering this is a movie where the budget is not more than a few $1,000s, I would imagine. Do you know what? I thought they did a fair performance, if we were being honest. How are the dragons? I mean, we'll come on to them again. They are very kind of rudimentary CGI, and we'll come on to the negatives. The final dragon looks a little bit more detailed. It looks like it's been rendered a little better than some of the others, but at least there is some kind of variety in dragons. And it looks like they've used sort of like a couple of like AI shots here and there to give like, you know, burning cities and stuff like that. And, you know, it's not overdone. You know, people who are very anti-AI, you know, this is the way the indie filmmakers are going to be going now. But I think this is a film where it's used sparingly, and I think just a couple of establishing shots to kind of give you some context, I think is absolutely sort of fine in my opinion at the very least. And there's one or two shots, maybe if you look at it as a still, I think it looks alright. Again, you've got to accept this is an extremely low budget movie, you know. If you don't accept that, you're not going to enjoy anything about this film. But, you know, at this channel, we are used to watching low budget fare. But even then, I'm going to come on to some negatives with this. But yeah, I think there's a couple of the renderings which look alright. Animation, not so much, but the renderings look alright. I think if you were to take like a still shot and show someone, oh yeah, that's alright. So let's talk about what doesn't work, and let's stick with the dragons, because ultimately I think this is what's going to draw people in. This is why people are going to want to watch this movie if they're into dragons. And although I think in particularly the final dragon, you see like a still shot of it, looks alright, but the rendering, the animation looks quite poor. You know, it doesn't quite interact properly with the background. It kind of looks like it's sort of like, you know, sort of floating on the sort of the backgrounds. The size of it really never feels like it's particularly sort of large or anything like that. I mean, there's a sequence where this final dragon like lands on this like sandy sort of area, and you can kind of just see footprints, and it looks like it might be the size of like a dog, because the way they shot it, you can see like footprints and stuff in the sand, and this dragon is kind of sat on top of it, and thinking, well, that doesn't look very big, but clearly it's supposed to be, because the camera then you know pans to or kind of cuts to our human characters, and they're kind of going like this, making it look like it's real big and stuff. And it's, you know, it needed to be a little bit more worked in regards to the environment and stuff, because the scale was never really kind of established. And then, as I say, when these things move and when they're animated, then it looks like PlayStation 2 graphics. I have to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, I've seen advertised on my feed about different effects packages that you can get, and you know, even with pre-made creatures and stuff, and it looks better than this, I have to be honest. So the actual sort of the graphics are extremely sort of low tech, shall we say. Like I said, I mean, you might be forgiving with the VFX. I tend to be a little bit, because I appreciate the budgets of these things, but you know, I think for most audiences, you look at this and think they kind of look like PlayStation 2 era sort of graphics. There's also very little interaction with the dragons and human characters, and again, I'm probably presuming this is down to budget. One difference maybe than this and Rain of Fire is that there's really not any action sequences in this movie. This is much more of a talky film, which is a point I'm going to come on to in a minute. But yeah, so it's, you know, it's kind of like a shot of you know, a blank background with a CGI dragon kind of with a composite shot on top of it, and then it cuts to kind of a human character in a different shot, and that's basically it. And there's not really any sort of action sequences and stuff like that in this movie, which again, it doesn't make it a particularly kind of thrilling movie, because it is an extremely talky movie. And let's talk about that. So, you know, I think the earnest performances gave this movie a little bit of leeway when it comes to delivering some of this kind of dialogue, but it is practically all characters telling us about the world around, you know, and that's basically it. It's an extremely exposition heavy movie, telling us lots about this world and what's going on, and the dragons and how they've come to be and stuff. And, you know, in context, I think, you know, it sounds like an interesting mythology, but it is just told to us through characters talking in like a living room or out in the woods and stuff like that. It is not exactly what you would call a visual spectacle. You know, so those who want more of a exciting movie, this is maybe not going to be for you. It is too sort of reliant on exposition, I would say. You know, and I'm forgiving of the budget to a degree, but even me, I was thinking, man, you know, is something going to happen? And then the final confrontation is a little bit of a damp squid, I've got to say. I mean, I think there needed to be a little bit more conflict going on in this movie. It all seems to be resolved a little bit too easily, and I get that they kind of want to. You know, when you kind of factor in the messaging in this movie, you kind of understand where it's going, but nonetheless, it really feels like the devastation that we're led to believe has been, you know, brought on humanity is never really seen. It's just, you know, we just have to accept that this is something that has happened off screen and stuff like that. So ultimately, it's not exactly a thrilling ride, this film. I think, you know, I'll give credence to the kind of the acting here, which I think was probably better than it had any right to be. The mythology was interesting, but it just doesn't have the budget to kind of show you, and it's way too heavy on the exposition. And, you know, looking at it purely from an aesthetic point of view, the dragons are very rudimentary CGI. You know, so I don't honestly think this movie will appeal to many people. I think I maybe appreciated it more than some, because again, I'm so used to watching low budget movies. But you know, even I got to be honest with you and say I can't say. I think my score, which is going to be a 4 out of 10, I think may be higher than other people would give it, because you know, I don't imagine there's a lot going for other people. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me. I'm curious to see if other people can what they glean out of this movie. What were your thoughts if you've seen it? Let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.